Hello, everybody. Incredibly quiet, hushed audience, starting very much on time. It's quite intimidating, I like it. But nice to meet you all. My name's Jack Pottle. I'm Medical Director of Oxford Medical Simulation. We're a virtual reality medical training company. And I have with me Bex.
Hello, I'm Bex. I'm a junior doctor by background, working mainly in A&E in Yorkshire. And also background in medical education and physical simulations. And I do a lot of the clinical authoring of the scenarios for OMS.
Hi, and I'm Jenny. I'm a learning technologist at OMS, and my background is in education and technology, and I've done teaching both also in different settings for school-age children in life sciences with a background in biological engineering, so slightly different, not quite clinical, but very excited about using VR for training and learning.
And I'm going to bore you with my background a little bit later on, so wait for that. In terms of this session, a lot of it will be discussion. Feel free to ask Jenny and Bex anything as well as me. They know just as much, if not more, about what we're doing than I do, so just ping questions to everyone. Okay, so session structure of today. What we'll do is I'll give a bit of an intro about me and the company, how we got to where we are. Hear a bit about your backgrounds, your aims, what you want to get out of this, and then we'll talk a bit about terminology, and people who were in the session earlier, of course, will have a head start on that, but we'll put it open in terms of AR, VR, MR. And then I'll talk a little bit about virtual reality simulation, but particularly the implementation side of that. So I want to get people thinking about how potentially to use it in your institutions, integrate it with curriculum, and really make sure it works on a practical level. And then we'll do demos. Ideally, we'll try and get individual people from certain tables through demos as well, so you can feel what it looks like. We are also downstairs, so you'll be able to get a feel of it afterwards as well. And really, questions and discussion, a lot of this is just about you asking us questions. I'm more than happy to talk through the evidence as well about VR, and we've got loads of slides on that if people are interested. So it will be guided by you in terms of what you want to talk about. Overview, we'll be talking about VR, AR, and MR, very briefly. Myth bust, people are always talking about VR and no one's really sure what's going on with it, so hopefully I'll try and cut through some of that. Informed decisions. You know, VR is out there now. People are coming to you saying, oh, we've got this VR equipment. Hopefully this will help you make some decisions around it. And then discussion. And a lot of this, as I say, will be discursive. Just ask us questions as we go along, and hopefully it'll stimulate ongoing discussions in what you're doing. And entertain. You know, we designed a serious educational tool, and it turns out people really enjoy it. So that's part of it as well, just to get you a feel of VR. So intros, we've been through Jenny and Bex. Sorry, Jenny, you all right?
No, you're all right. I'm just with more or less a chair. I'm sort of supposed to come in and chair. So if you're happy, Jack, I will step into the bridge.
That's fine. I just cracked on, Jane.
No, you cracked on.
Intros. In terms of my background, I started life in educational psychology. I then worked in nursing as a healthcare assistant for 2 years. I've now been a doctor in the NHS for 5 years. I'm now working on this full-time. Still keep my hand in. I'm in acute emergency medicine oncology. Also developed an online open education platform called Oxford Medical Education. That was designed to bridge the gap between training and practice. Videos, website content, and it was then 360-degree immersive content. And I can talk a bit about the 360-degree stuff later. Very much our journey was then taking all of that, and I become a physical simulation instructor over that time, and taking everything that we do in physical sim, so that immersion, that stress, that sense of learning from experience, building in the feedback, elements of self-debrief, and packaging that up into virtual reality so that you can, as a sim center, you can use this to do some of the work for you. And this, as I will keep on referring to, is just a tool. This is not meant to replace physical simulation. That's not really what it's about. It's about clinical decision-making, critical thinking, and clinical reasoning. That's the focus of our scenarios, and hopefully you'll see that as we go through it. That's my monologue. Just by a show of hands, in terms of your backgrounds, who works kind of physically in a sim center? Great. Sim techs? Perfect. Kind of more senior sim managers? Great. And general educational faculty? Okay, there's a lovely mix of people. Does anyone do anything? He works for Laird, so it's fine, I know about that. Anyone else do anything exciting that they'd like to tell me about? Does anyone work in VR? No, okay. Which would also be fine. Aims, what do you guys want to get out of this? Just shout some things at me and we'll try and deal with them as we go through. Great. Great.
Challenges of integration.
Perfect.
Is it worth it?
Perfect. Again, both very good questions. Anything else?
I think how it complements physical simulation.
Yeah, perfect.
And investing in it across a
Perfect. If I don't cover any of those, just pick me up at the end and say, Jack, you said you were going to talk about this. But I will hopefully touch on all of those things. Okay, something for the floor, and I know that you've seen this in a previous session potentially. Who would be confident in answering all of these questions? Perfect. Jenny, do you I'm not going to ask Jenny to necessarily define them, but would you like to go through and tell people a little bit more about them? There you go.
So, let's talk a little bit about all of these. They're all ultimately different ways of looking at virtual reality compared to our physical reality. And virtual reality generally refers to this environment that is oftentimes computer generated in some sort of fashion, and these variations of virtual reality through to augmented reality kind of show you a little bit of how you might have that computer generated environment, that scenario, interacting with the real world around you. So in virtual reality, a lot of it is about a digital environment that's all produced by this computer, and you can view it either on a screen, which you might see, or potentially on a mobile in a cardboard headset, or also as an experience that you view in a head-mounted display, which is what we use. So we use an Oculus Rift, and ultimately everything that you see or experience is within that virtual environment. However, in augmented reality, you start to see that folks are using different types of headsets or glasses or potentially mobile phones to overlay aspects of that computer generated environment or a character like this robot on top of the reality that we have in our physical world. So this robot now is no longer just in this virtual world, but is actually on top of things that you see in the real world. However, mixed reality has been something that's come up more recently to take more of the input from your physical reality and integrate how that computer-generated object is interacting with that physical world. So the robot here knows that there's that couch and is actually not just floating on top of this couch, but actually meaningfully behind the couch, or perhaps you can have them sit on the couch. And so all of these together, just different variations of how you might play with virtual computer-generated object and environment and our real world and that spectrum in between. And sometimes you'll hear this term called extended realities that is an umbrella term for all of them, just recognizing that actually a lot of our reality is about our perception of it and how we interact with it.
Thank you very much. I have a slightly easier job of doing some of that explanation with some examples of it. So just to give you an idea, augmented reality covers a broad range of things. Pokemon Go is a classic example of incredibly simple augmented reality. You've got your real world and you've got an object overlaid on top of it. But the one most people are much more aware of is Microsoft HoloLens. So this again is a visor that goes over your vision and something is overlaid on top of that. And it is in use in healthcare. So for example, things like, I think this is Pearson, use a kind of anatomy teaching using augmented reality where you can actually see the virtual person and interact with other people around that as well. And this is something from CAE, again it's kind of AR, MR in terms of ultrasound teaching. And it's very good for certain things. So this is a really good use of technology in terms of it's got a set task and this is the problem that you're trying to solve. However, in terms of AR and MR in general, and I don't, who's actually tried any of the augmented reality Microsoft HoloLens things? Great, okay, fantastic. So you know roughly what I'm talking about. In fact, what do people think of it, just in terms of an experience?
It takes a while to adjust, I think. It's very immersive though when it's right.
Yep.
That's my synopsis.
Great.
Thumbs down at the back there.
Not necessarily thumbs down, it's more my issue was the field of view. I got complete reality break when I looked down. It was just obviously the patient bit of vanishes, so it broke it for me. So
yeah,
that was just.
And I think it's a really good point that illustrates that. So that's a kind of letterbox effect you can get on augmented reality, where you can see the whole world, but only a small part of your world is actually virtual, and it moves when you look around. And it's that disconnect between what we imagine when we think of augmented and mixed reality, where you go, this is going to be brilliant, there's going to be things integrated with my environment, and actually the tech just isn't quite there yet. It will be, but we're not quite at that stage. And as the chap at the back said, you get that sense of a break in the immersion. It just doesn't feel real enough, and that takes you away from that sense of reality. It's lower fidelity than VR. You often get a kind of cyber sickness, and I'll talk a little bit about nausea in VR afterwards. But for us, it's more about you can't take people to a new world. We're not saying that VR is better than AR at all. It completely depends what problem you're trying to solve. But for us, we're trying to use a laptop and virtual reality headset to take people to that world, make them feel immersed and learn from experience. Whereas AR you need to do in the context of another world, so with a mannequin or with an actor to be able to augment that. So virtual reality. Virtual reality has been around for ages. So, you know, I don't know how long ago this was. This is not what we do, by the way. But it's been around for a really, really long time. And the point of that is there's a huge amount of research that's gone into it to build up that base of knowledge, and I can tell you a little bit more about that. Worth pausing to talk about screen-based, 360, and fully immersive VR, because this is really confusing when you start to do literature reviews on the topic. There's no way of separating out these three things very well, because everything describes itself as virtual, because it's good for marketing, but they're totally different experiences that have different advantages and benefits. So, screen-based, obviously e-learning or something like vSim for nursing. It's really good for accessibility, but it doesn't make you feel like you're there. 360 video is fully immersive, is really good for giving you a sense of being in an individual place. So it's really good if you want to give people an idea of what it's like to be in a ward. You know, it's used for kids in MRIs, for example. Really good to put them in a different world where they don't need to interact with it. However, you can't work with it to be able to interact as you would do in real life. You can use hotspots, and you also can't move around in a 360-degree world. So if you move around in the physical world, you don't move around in the 360-degree world. And that's one of the things that creates a vestibulo-ocular disconnect. So basically, your head's not quite sure where it should be in relation to your ears, and that's what makes people feel sick sometimes. And that's why we've done a fair bit of work on 360 initially with Oxford Medical Education, and that was about that sense of immersion, that sense of engagement, but it lacked the ability to interact well with your environment and the ability to really create something that felt real, to build in that functional fidelity so that people can go, yeah, this is my world. And that's why we've gone down the route of fully immersive VR, which is what we'll be showing you. So that's all computer generated. Basically, it's computer gaming. It's serious gaming for education in a fully immersive virtual world. That was a slightly younger me, by the way. I'm haggard and old since then. It's been a long journey. Types of hardware. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, I've tried VR. And when you ask them, they go, oh, I've tried the Google Cardboard. And it is absolutely VR. It's where you pop your phone into a headset, it costs £10. It doesn't really feel very good. It makes you feel uncomfortable and makes you feel sick quite often. And that is partly due to the fact that it's 3 degrees of freedom, is what it's called. And that means that when you move in the real world, you don't move in the virtual world. Same as I was talking about with 360 video. That's what makes you feel a bit sick. It means you can't stay in it for a long time. Whereas you move through all these different other kinds of headset, anything that you put your phone in is basically 3 degrees of freedom, so you cannot move in the physical world and in the virtual world. When you get more complex, you get down to things like the Oculus Rift, which is what we use, and the HTC Vive. So these are the two that are really high-end and that make you feel like you're there. We use Oculus because it's portable, because you can move it around, and therefore as a kind of sim professional, you can actually take it to different places, integrate sim more with your practice. And this is it, all single dancing modes, made by Facebook. Costs about £300 in terms of the hardware. More expensive thing when you're dealing with VR, as someone mentioned this in a previous session, is the laptop. So the laptops that you need to run this tend to need to be much more powerful than a normal laptop. So you need to be thinking about that cost, the hardware cost, as well as the software cost if you're thinking about VR. This just gives you an idea of it's very immersive, and there's lots of different ways to interact in VR. We use very simple point-and-click remote because that's what gets people into it, that's what builds up the accessibility. And I mentioned that in AR and MR you can have other people. You can see other people in the world as well as a virtual object, and that's got advantages. You can also do that in VR, so you can build a totally virtual world and have more than one person in that world at the same time. What we're going to show you is single-player virtual reality, so you are a doctor or nurse in a single-player scenario. There's a non-player character, computerized nurse who you can ask to help you. We are building multiplayer, so that'll be up to 6 people all in a scenario at once, being able to work around the virtual patient with feedback, with debrief. Okay, I'm just going to throw this over to you guys a little bit, because the point of this is about kind of why do VR sim and then how to integrate it. Just throw out some of the challenges that you're facing in physical sim. What kind of things do you struggle with on a daily basis, do you think? You know what? And don't particularly think about VR, just throw some ideas out.
So availability of the space.
Yeah, the space we get a lot.
Certain environments are hard to recreate.
Yep, the environment's hard to recreate.
Candidates quite often consider a level of dramatic.
Sorry, say it again?
Candidates will quite often say, well, what have done that feature?
Yes, yeah, so that sense of they can't quite suspend their disbelief enough to be immersed. Yeah.
Can't make my simulated patients look as ill from the end of the bed as I want.
Okay. Great. I think there's a slide coming up just on the...
Staff,
And that idea of staff and being able to get your students in, all the scheduling that goes around that, the room booking as well, absolutely. And the reason I bring this up is because I've been through all of this as well, and that's why we decided to build virtual reality as a solution to some of these issues. And again, don't get me wrong, VR is not a solution to everything. It is not going to solve all of your problems, but it is meant to take some of the weight off. So these are the kind of things that we get, faculty numbers, time, space, scheduling, and then of course the financial case. As Pascal Bilingeri, to the back of the other session, was what's the ROI in terms of the bottom line of this, and that up there, does it work? That's what you should be asking, and hopefully I'll talk to you about some of that. We very much design our simulations based off best practice. So we did a big literature review before starting this. I say we, Jenny did a big literature review before we started this. And there are really good papers on this in terms of you take sim right back to the basics. So this is Issenberg 2009, just picked out these individual features. And these are ranked in order of importance of what he thought was important in simulation. And one of the things that always surprises me about this is repetitive practice. And it's something that in physical sim I really struggled with. You get people through, you give them a debrief, and then you can't get them to go back in and repeat because we're so stretched for time and for space. Yet it's one of the most important things in letting people learn. And for us, VR has that advantage of being able to get people through deliberate practice much, much quicker. But all of these are hopefully built in, and feel free, do pick me up on these if you feel that we're not meeting any of these needs. Why we do it, I think I've talked about already. It's about being able to integrate sim with practice, get more people through it, to ultimately improve their performance. And our focus is on performance improvement. It's not even about learning, it's about applying that learning to practice. Decision making, clinical reasoning, and critical thinking. And it's on a virtual reality platform that we can talk you through. And in terms of the team, we are clinicians, educators, sim faculty, as well as a kind of technical team who do a lot of the artistry, animation, development as well. The reason I'm telling you all of that is because we work with institutions as well to build what they want. We don't just build our own content, we're very collaborative. We love working with people. We've done a load of research on this, but we put it out for other people to do research with it as well, because I'm far too biased now to do my own research. And so that's all part of the process and part of the collaboration that we put in place. There's a simulation. At the end of the simulation, everything that you've done is being logged, is being tagged, is being timestamped, and there's a period of guided reflection. And I'm going to stop on guided reflection for a little bit because it's something that people were talking about in the previous session. How do you do debrief in VR? And this was a lot of Jenny's previous work on our platform, was looking at that process. How can we take self-debrief, how can we take facilitated debrief and merge it with VR? And I can talk to you a little bit more about that after we've been through the scenarios, because hopefully it'll make more sense when you've been through them. So simulation, guided reflection, and then the really structured feedback. What went well, areas for improvement. Data analytics and reporting all comes part of this, so you as an institution can see how well people are doing, how they're improving over time. But the individual can also see how well they're doing, and we can gamify it a little bit to get them through. Okay. I'm bored of the sound of my own voice, and I think probably we should just show you a little bit of what it's like to be in VR. So, Bex, that one's the one connected up. What we'll do is hopefully, Bex is just going to take you through a scenario, and you guys can shout out at her what you want her to do, and she can just have a play. We've not done it this way before. Who knows whether it's going to work?
Within reason.
Yes, so.
Right, so whilst we're getting all this set up, I'll just take you through a little bit about putting on the headset. So I don't wear glasses, but if you do wear glasses, you can leave them on with the headset. You've just got to be a bit careful with it. And literally, it's just a case of popping it over your eyes and your ponytail if you've got one. And then just kind of getting it in focus. So if any of you have already been to us, we probably talked you through this, but if any of you come and visit us, this is what we want you to do. So you just kind of move it up and down on your head until it gets into focus, and then there's kind of straps on the top and straps on the sides to adjust it. And that's it, you're in. It's as simple as that. Most people find it pretty easy to do that, and once you get used to it, it becomes really quick. You then have a clicker. So this is how we interact. So when we start the scenario, you'll see that there's a little white dot, that's my cursor, and the cursor is moved with my head, not with my hands. So you see a lot of people kind of do this Harry Potter kind of Wingardium Leviosa thing. It's nothing to do with that, it's all the movement comes with the head, and that kind of helps with that preventing the vestibular ocular disconnect, because where you're looking is where you're interacting. So, shall we get started? Should we start starting with George? George. So we're going to launch a scenario for you now, and hopefully this should. So now, are you guys going to be able to hear this?
Yes.
Yes.
So worth saying, before this we normally give individuals a pre-brief, an introduction and orientation to sim, like we do in physical sim. In this case, Bex has done this so many times that I don't think we need to. But normally there's a bit of introduction.
So we're loading.
And as you'll see at the start, she's going to get a hand over again as we would do in physical sim. A hand over from the nurse, and then she'll begin.
Hello, doctor. I'm really worried about this new patient, George. He's just come into the department and looks really unwell. I've not gotten any background information yet, but I'm really worried about him. Can you come and see him now?
Sorry, folks. I actually moved this.
Hello, George. What can I do for you today?
You just take that off.
Hi, Doc. Thanks for coming. I feel terrible. I hope you can find out what's going on.
Okay.
Just take it out and put it back in again. Yep.
Yep. Oh dear. We seem to be doing a full setup now. I mean, there's me saying that VR's been around forever and never fails, and this happens. This isn't. Oh, here we go, Bex.
It's not asking me to click anything.
Oh, click anyway.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe.
So one of the nice things about the technology is that it does work with a series of different sensors, and so you can really get things to be dynamic, working with your height, and then things are, then dynamic to the height of the individual. You get that appropriate perspective. And then the setup is generally pretty easy. Oculus has gotten to a point where a lot of the support is strong and solid, and we also can help out with some of that support too. So.
You just click the remote, please, Bex. Great.
So we didn't really intend to show you how to set it up, but this is how you set it up. You just plug it all into the computer. But it is kind of that kind of turn on, turn off kind of. If it doesn't work, you just give it a wiggle. But most of the time, once you've got it set up properly for your particular height, then you'll be able to do that fairly easily, and you'll be able to go from scenario to scenario. I can't see a thing.
Shall I just have a look?
Yes, go on, have a look.
And the setup is that easy.
She says.
Yeah, Bex, you got it. Thank you.
So, challenges of VR sim. Occasionally, technology misbehaves itself. But again, when we train institutions, there are very easy fixes that are kind of the troubleshooting things to do. And so largely it is turn on, turn off again. Right, should we start again?
Okay, just pop that on. If there are any questions while this is loading, by the way, just ping them at me. Fill the silence. Luckily, once you have got it set up and you've got the height set, you then don't need to do anything again, so you can get loads of data through it once it's been set up. It's just that I obviously nudged something as I was coming up the stairs, and that's made it all break. So, we're going to be in the scenario again. Bex is hopefully going to be a sensible height. We're going to get the hand over from the nurse.
Rather than 2 foot tall, which is...
And if Bex isn't a sensible height, we'll probably just switch to a different computer.
Yeah, I think so.
Hello, doctor. I'm really worried about this new patient, George. He's just come into the department and looks really unwell. I've not gotten any background information yet, but I'm really worried about him. Can you come and see him now?
Hello, George. What can I do for you today?
Hi, Doc. Thanks for coming. I feel terrible. I hope you can find out what's going on.
Right, so before I start, I'll just kind of orientate you with the room a little bit. So I can turn, I've got 360 degree of view here, so I can look at the doors. If I really want to run away, I can run away. I move over here, I've got a sink where I can wash my hands, I've got a phone, so if I'm really panicking, I can call my senior. I can give medication from the drug cabinets, and I can order some radiology or look at some guidelines on the computer. I've got oxygen, I've got some needly blood tests back down here. And if I look at the patient, I can talk to him and examine him. And I've got my nurse, and I've also got some observations. So I'm going to start off for my medical school training by getting a set of observations. And then I'm going to let, I'm feeling particularly lazy, so I'm going to let the room tell me what to do next. So all of these observations are dynamic, so when they pop up, you'll be able to see that they are not normal, but we can try and do some stuff to make them normal. So can I have some suggestions on the floor about what we might want to do?
Oxygen.
Oxygen, right, so I'm going to look at the back wall, click on some oxygen, and I'm going to give him 50 litres because he is obviously acutely unwell.
And just in response to that chap who was talking about unwellness, you'll see that he looks pretty rubbish now. He's going to deteriorate.
If I get really close to him, he looks really sweaty.
But as we put on some oxygen, he's pinking up gradually.
And now looking at his saturations, they've gone up to 100%, 99%, so that's good. I'm happy with that. So I'm kind of starting my ABCD kind of thing here. So he's already talked to me, so I'm kind of happy with my AIB, breathing, okay. I might want to have a listen to his chest actually, so I'm just going to do that. I can actually have a look around the back of his chest as well.
Promise in the headset, if he's not actually got preps all over his chest, that is my particular breath sound.
So that sounds nice and clear to me. Right, so I'm on to see, I'm looking at his blood pressure, I'm not particularly happy with that, so suggestions. Cannulate him, is there an anaesthetist in the room? So I'm going to look down at my IV access, and I'm going to ask my nurse to insert the IV access because I'm against it, I'm feeling lazy. So as you can see, my nurse is now popping in some IV access, and she is an incredible cannulator, and she's just got that straight away. Thank you. So now I can give some fluids. So I'm going to click on the fluids, and I'm just going to give 500 ml.
Those fluids are up and running. I'll let you know when that bag's finished.
Great. So, I think I might try and talk to George actually now. I've got some stuff going. I'm going to ask him what is going on. So we've got a presenting complaint.
Can you tell me about what's brought you in today?
Well, I was fine yesterday, but started feeling unwell this morning. I've been hot and really shivery for a few hours. I've never felt this unwell before.
You will notice that these patients are American, by the way, because we go over there quite a lot. To Britain, we do fully British scenarios as well. He actually sounds quite like Jason Statham in the British version.
He does. Right, suggestions. Where would we like to go next?
Bex, just in the interest of time, do you want to do something like look at the guidelines?
Okay, yeah, so I will look at the computer. So I've decided, so I'm just going to go to the top and go to the, considering he's got a fever, we'll go for sepsis. So I can look and say, okay, I can look down some of those, decide that, yeah, I think he has got some red flags for sepsis there. And then I'm going to manage. So I've given him IV oxygen, I've got IV access, I've given fluids, I've got antibiotics, urine output. So I might put a catheter in for him actually, so.
We're going to insert a catheter for you now, if that's okay.
So we get a little fade to black whilst the catheter goes in, because there's some things that you need to simulate, and some things you really don't. So now if I go down, I can now have a look at his urine output, so I can see what's going on, I can see, so I'm happy with that.
That bag of fluid is finished, doctor.
Thank you. We can also order radiology, so I can order an X-ray.
Just at this point, sorry, the nurse is very good at closing communication. Just at this point, do people have questions about the scenario and the setup? Because this is quite a good time to pause and ask about kind of design choices and why we've done certain things. Just feel free to throw questions at us. Or not. Yeah, Bex, a question about checking allergies.
Are you allergic to anything?
Yes, I'm very allergic to penicillin. I had it once and my throat swelled up and I couldn't breathe. I had to go to intensive care. It was terrifying.
Yeah, so all the communication
is ready on the computer, doctor.
Is laid out in a similar way to as we think if you're a doctor or if you're a nurse. Totally depends on the individual that we design the scenario for. And all of the scenarios are just designed from the learning objectives, and that's what I'll pause to talk to you about after this.
So just to show you as well, so we did a chest X-ray, the nurse has told me that it's now been uploaded to the computer, and now I can see, and I'm quite happy with that, that's a nice clear chest X-ray. But obviously we can change any of these, so you can have a pneumonia, you can have anything that you can get an X-ray of really.
Okay, Bex, if you leave the scenario now, we'll just flick across to, so
I've been, my bleep's gone off and I've decided that I'm going to let somebody else do it with George. So, we then go into this kind of period of reflection. You can hear some nice, can you hear the mute, can you hear the sort of the nice relaxing? So what we try and do at this point is kind of encourage our students to kind of talk out loud. So ask them, how did that feel? And try and either say to a peer or just to themselves, you know, that those kind of key things that we do when we do a physical sim, but actually in virtual reality, in this kind of nice environment, which is out, sort of helping them transition from VR to the kind of the real world, but then we can customize all of these questions to kind of replicate those sort of questions that we'd be asking the facilitator there as well. So how did that feel? I mean, I've done that scenario quite a few times, so for me it wasn't too bad, but usually, you know, you've got a patient who's septic, they're looking really sweaty, most people would, the sort of things that we get back as well, that was actually a bit stressful. There was lots of stuff going on, there was lots of noise, there was lots of beeping in the background.
I think you can just, if you click through these back,
yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about 3 things that went well, and why did they go well, and then 3 things that didn't go so well, and why they didn't go so well. Specific actions to take to improve your future practice.
And again, these kind of questions are all based on the Pearls framework, but we're very much using lots of different debriefing frameworks to be able to train people in different ways, and we're more than happy to experiment with people to find out what works for them in terms of that self-debriefing. So we've got about 15 minutes left. What I really wanted to focus on is what you've been talking about in your groups now in terms of implementation, and then us talk about some implementation stories as well. So in terms of implementing AR, VR table at the back right, what have you thought about problems, challenges, and by the way, do focus as well on the advantages and potential disadvantages. Happy with anything.
The table at the back had a very said something where they had very specific scenarios that needed to be done at short notice. So
we do a bit in situ predominantly, so the main areas that we find we would be able to program into a virtual reality environment because we don't know it exists until we do the in situ simulation and find out the procedure doesn't actually work.
Yeah, so the question about in situ sim essentially, I think in situ sim should be left as in situ sim. I think it's so important. The environment is totally integral to it. It's not the best use of VR necessarily. And that's why, I mean, VR is not the solution to everything. I love in situ sim. I think VR is more for deliberate practice, churning people through, making sure they get the basics. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Second table back. Questions, thoughts? So weirdly, that headset there, I've dropped about 5 times. I've been over to the US and back about 6 times with it. Amazingly, it's held up. We've only had one person breaking it, who was an enormous man who just tried to lift the headphone off and just ripped it out. I thought, you can't legislate for that. But generally, they're really quite solid. Yeah.
And again, that comes with when you're integrating these, you need to train your students how to put them on and things like that. And I think you can overcome a lot of those sorts of things, like teach people how to handle it.
Do you think you need to supervise that when people use it?
So, really good question, and actually, Jenny, can we skip on one? So, this is, and I've skipped slightly through lots of discussion about it because I think this will hopefully answer some of those queries. So there is no specific way of using this. It completely depends on your institution, but people are looking at it in 2 ways. One is to have, well, in more than 2 ways. One is to have a room with Pincode access just open, or with everything tied down, and potentially a booking system to allow people to come in, use it as and when they want in their free time, to integrate sim in what they're doing, or to take the kit onto the wards to be able to bring the sim centre out elsewhere. You can use that with no faculty at all. I still like an in-person debrief, not necessarily straight after it, but I like that support that you have as a learner, whether that's asynchronous afterwards. So they don't need to be supervised, but I like having a human at some point that they can go to. Yeah. This table here.
Just wondered how you can increase the complexity of it. So do you think because of it being a drop-down list of options, that it's very good for senior medical students, junior doctors, that as you get higher on your training, it perhaps you need to think a bit more outside the box. It doesn't, at the moment, is the technology able to accommodate that?
Yeah, so a really good question, essentially about the complexity of these scenarios. How do you build up more complexity to make it more difficult for senior people? Is the technology able to accommodate it? Yes, because you can build in more diagnostic uncertainty. So you can just throw more difficult things into the scenario. And we always build a bit of diagnostic uncertainty in to increase that stress level. The diagnostic uncertainty is the key, really, to making a scenario difficult, and you can extend the time someone's in it. So yes, you can make it appropriate for more senior people as well. What it's not for is making sure they're doing all the procedures correctly, because that's not what we're looking at. But yes, it completely depends on where you set your learning objectives. If your learning objectives are super difficult, you know, the amount of terlipresence given this situation, and you can design that as well. But these specific scenarios are designed for, as you say, senior medical students and junior doctors. Oh yeah, so and nursing students as well, with a different library. Yeah.
And also with the menus, I think depending on the students, having those that huge list of choice makes it actually difficult, because a lot of it is about that decision making, about that prioritization. So I think a lot of people see a menu and automatically think, oh, this is so much easier, but it isn't necessarily. And I think you're also getting to the point of asking about, well, can we start to integrate things like voice or AI into like the system? And that's currently what we're trying to keep up with the technology, where yes, if you look at your Google Home or your Alexa, things like that are emerging right now, and we do want to keep with that cutting edge, but it's just not quite there yet. And we made that conscious decision where what are we trying to teach at this point? A lot of it is about making that decision, and so doing the menus the way that we have has been that conscious decision to go, yes, let's do that, let's get this in people's hands so that they can use it, and then down the road in the pipeline, things like that we'll want to integrate.
In terms, sorry.
Sorry, no, just maybe the opposite end of that. If the low-tech enhancements will be used is, I work predominantly pre-hospital where you can come across anything from A to Z. We use a company here in Manchester who will produce any smell via gas chromatograph analysis into a fragrance bottle. So we put them in the blackness, then put a bib with one spray to smell. And do you smoke? No, of course I don't. Yet, you can smell 60 woodbines a day in this scenario, or be that petrol or fuel or alcohol or whatever. It costs 20 quid.
Yeah.
It could be integrated with the VR that can actually
Nice
add
solution.
an extra layer of factors.
So it's interesting.
We've had this question,
Yeah,
actually.
it's something that was brought up at a very similar talk previously. So you can integrate olfactory stuff. Thing is, smells are really difficult to get rid of. So once you've created one, it's very difficult to move on to a different scenario and get rid of that smell. So we haven't done it, but yes, I mean, it can be done. A lot of what we do is about spatialized audio. So as you move around the room, you get audio from different places, and that's kind of a way of increasing immersion as well. In terms of implementation, Rosie, you're not allowed to answer this because we're working with Rosie already. But from anyone else, what are your thoughts about implementation in where you're working? Questions, concerns, ideas?
It's fantastic. I think the infrastructure, the setup of your individual trust will have to be accommodated. I think it could be viewed extravagant, not by ourselves. I think if you understand the benefits of it and the advantages it has, but I think it could be viewed above as a bit extravagant and unnecessary when something works and you get results from it. So that's probably, obviously cost.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to specifically talk about cost here. If you want to talk about cost, we'll be downstairs, but I can talk about that. What I will talk about, sorry, table second from the back. Any specific questions? Implementation, curriculum integration, ways of working it practically. And if not, table at the far end. Again, nothing from you, Andy.
How far away do you think you are from it becoming less clunky and more real?
That's a tough question. Have you been through it?
No, my son is studying games design, so he's always coming home and talking about such things.
Great.
So it's just kind of like, in medicine, it would be quite nice to know. Because we just think how far we've gone. We were talking about that earlier. Games design maybe 10 years ago was the computer and you were clicking on everything, whereas now you're in it, and it's that.
Yeah. No, so absolutely. I suppose the first answer to that is I would just suggest you get in it and give it a shot. On screen, it looks clunky and click-based. When you're in there, you get much more to be like, okay, that is my world. I know I put on a headset, but that is my world and I'm there, and you kind of move away from that. So yeah, difficult question. I mean, it's continually developing. We've got artists and animators from Disney, DreamWorks on this, so the character kind of fidelity is as high as it can be at the moment. So, but yeah, we'll see what we can do. We'll keep working.
Let's go back to some of those questions that we had at the beginning as well.
Yes.
So we had the relationship between physical sim, which we sort of, and VR sim, which we touched a little bit on at the back. As Jack mentioned, we're not trying to replace physical sim, but what we can offer is the availability to do that deliberate practice. So you can do a physical sim, you can have a debrief, and then you can say to people, actually, if you felt like you need to go practice that, you can go and practice it in VR. So you can get much more throughput of the VR, and you can complement scenarios that you've done. You can do blended learning, so you could do a scenario where you sort of about fluid management, and you could have the sort of the VR simulation, and then you could do some physical practice using mannequins, and you could do a blended session, so you could split your session in half. So we always say, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? And you can certainly blend the learning or use it to complement some more physical stuff as well. We've done some implementation challenges. Hopefully you've got a bit more of an idea of what's it all about, and then is it worth it? Is it worth it? So, is he gone now, that chap? Oh, the chap who asked if it was worth it has decided it wasn't worth it. That's one way of dealing with it. So for everyone else, is it worth it? Well, we think yes. I mean, you create
You create a huge ROI in terms of the amount of people you can get through simulation, and this is just delivering the same techniques with a different technology. That's all we're trying to do, and be able to free up your time to do other parts of sim that are better done not in VR. You know, the subtleties of team interaction. It's not best for VR. In situ sim, it's not best for VR. This is just good for getting people through quickly. And also, and someone mentioned exams, just being able to kind of relax people a little bit so they're not quite as stressed as they're moving through either to physical simulation or to the wards itself. That is where I think VR fits. And there is good evidence in terms of cost savings. There's a good paper that came out this year from someone nursing in the US comparing VR sim to physical sim in nursing education. Equal efficacy, and VR was of course a lot cheaper. So the evidence is out there. Just ping me an email, I'm more than happy to take you through it. We've also done trials ourselves on this platform to show that it does make a difference, in terms of the quantitative results, but also the qualitative results. How do people feel it's going to influence their practice, and then does it make a difference to the treatment? Because that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to change the way people perform to improve patient care, as we all are, and we're just trying to do it in a different way. I think we're approaching the end. Jane is going to be rigorous in terms of time. Are there any final questions to ask?
Is any of this technology available on the Oculus Go?
So, good question. So, for the benefit of everyone who doesn't know about VR, this is Oculus Rift, so you need a computer to run it. It's 6 degrees of freedom. Oculus Go is a standalone headset that's just on its own. So yes, you can downport this. We've optimized for the high quality headsets, and that's partly because they're still not, they don't feel as real as this. And for us, it's that fidelity, that creation of the sense of reality that's important. But yes, we will be doing things for other hardware as well. Currently, we just use Rift because it's the best thing out. Anyone else? Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. We're downstairs if you've got any questions. If you want to be critical of any of this research, great. Send me an email. I'll send you some papers and we can discuss it. And do so amongst yourselves. If you've got any other questions, just be back in touch. But nice to see you all. I hope this has given you a chance to hear a little bit about VR, hear about what's the difference between AR and VR, think about how you would implement it potentially in your system, think about the good points, think about the bad points, and really think about where it might fit in your ongoing simulation journeys. But thank you very much for your time.